most of the Buddhists are the untouchable caste,
Mm, mm.
which seemed odd to me because like Buddhism is breaking the bonds of castes and whatnot. So are they turning away from the caste system at that point?
Yeah, well, the Buddha himself very much turned away from the caste system and, threw it out. Buddhism was very prominent in India until the 12th century. And then there was an invasion. The big monastic universities, Nalanda, Vikramashila, Dantapuri, those ones, got decimated. And so Buddhism really began to fade in India itself. And, it went back to Brahmanism, and Hinduism flourished, and there were Muslims and so on. So there weren't very many Buddhists in India after the 13th century, really. And then what happened because, India has always, or caste system has always been a difficult thing in India and a subject of controversy. And so Dr. Ambedkar, who was from the Dalits, they're the untouchable caste, he managed to get an education and he was very wise, and I forget what his career was, but anyway, he led a movement among the Dalits to convert to Buddhism because Buddhism didn't believe in the caste system. And so he did that as a political way of giving these people self-esteem and freeing them from the Hindu caste system. So in 1956, I think there were 500,000 untouchables who converted to Buddhism with Dr. Ambedkar. And so, many of those people are still practicing. And so those are the core of the Indian Buddhists nowadays. Then in 1959, you had the Tibetan refugees coming, 59, 60, and after that, then after Communist China invaded Tibet, then you had all these Tibetans coming into India and reestablishing their monasteries and communities. Okay, but they were largely different from the, Dr. Ambedkar's disciples, because they spoke different languages and, practiced differently and so on. Although His Holiness and some of the Geshis, His Holiness really likes teaching Indians, and he makes sure that he does it in Bombay, in Delhi, in Bangalore, and so he's really reestablishing the connection with the Indian population. And he says very clearly, the Tibetans, we have our tradition due to the kindness of the Indians. And so we're a follower of the great Indian Panditas and Mahasiddhas. Yeah. Yeah, when you learn Buddhism, you learn the philosophy, but then you also have to learn something about the history too, because no religion exists independent of the culture, the climate, the political situation, the economic situation of whatever land it's in. Yeah, it's always influenced by these things. But the real heart of the spiritual practice is something that is not influenced by those. Okay, that applies to everybody at all times, all generations. So like, for example, in Buddhism, when we talk about our ignorance, anger, and attachment producing the karma that causes suffering, that works for everybody, all times, every continent, everywhere. So that never changes. The fact that the wisdom realizing emptiness can cut ignorance, that never changes, okay? But, as Buddhism goes from one culture to another, what the altars look like changes. Sometimes the scriptures are in different languages. In Japan, for example, you have a very lush climate, so the temples tend to be rather not so many things, and very uncluttered atmosphere. Buddhism went to Tibet, where a good part of the land is above tree line where you can see for miles and there is nothing. So in their temples, what did they do? Whoo, so many colors and so many different things going on. Yeah. So these kinds of things are really influenced by the place and the historical time. Yeah. And so I think maybe I mentioned, I can't remember if it was you or the week before you came, you know, like in Southeast Asia, the monastics went on Pindapat, they went on alms round. It was a hot climate. There was already a tradition in those countries of feeding wandering mendicants. So it was very easy for the Buddhists to be wandering mendicants too. They went with their alms round in town, people gave them food, no problem. Yeah, you go, when Buddhism went to China, they thought that the monastics were begging, and begging was really looked down upon, you know, and so they had to change that. And then in addition, if the, for example, the Chan practitioners, or Zen Chan practitioners, if they stayed in town, then you had all the politics in town with the emperor and all the Confucian hierarchy and bureaucracy, and they didn't want to have anything to do with it, so they went out into the mountains. And so obviously they couldn't go on Pindapat there. They had to start cooking their own food. They also had to start growing some of their own food because they were no longer in the town where there was lots of food to be given to them. So you get all these different kinds of changes according to the situation that the Dharma's in. But the actual teachings, you know, those are work on the human mind, you know, everybody equally. You know, sometimes they have to be presented in a slightly different way because of cultural change, but the meaning is the same. Okay, so for example, you know, I remember because I was in the first generation of Westerners hearing teachings from the Tibetan Lamas, and so the Tibetan commentaries, they're filled with examples from Tibetan culture. And the Tibetans love these examples, and they tell stories, and the Tibetans crack up laughing at these stories. And these stories, like, we would sit there and go, huh? You know, what does that mean? What in the world are they, you know, in an oral teacher, what are they laughing at? You know, because it just was very foreign to our culture. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now, you know, when we teach in the West, at least people like me, we tell different stories that people can relate to. Yeah. Yeah, one of my favorite stories that the Tibetans told, I'm getting off track here, but just so you'll know what I'm talking about. What was, yes, it was a story told in the section of the Lamrim, you know, the stages of the path, where we contemplate impermanence and our own mortality as a way of helping us set good priorities and not wasting our time in life. So they have a story of one man who, let's see, he wasn't married yet, but he started, you know, he was a young man and he started dreaming about getting married, and then he was going to have all these kids, and he started thinking about what the kids were going to look like and if they'd look like him and what he was going to name the kids, and he got so enthusiastic thinking about the kids he was going to have and the names he was going to give them and everything, that he started dancing in his room. And he had a big stick when he was dancing, and he accidentally hit a bag of sampa, which is roasted barley flour, that was hanging on the ceiling, and it fell and crashed on his head, and he died. And this story is supposed to signify to us about don't waste your time planning for the future when you're alive, you know. But they tell the story as if it were literally true. Yeah.
Do you think that maybe it was true?
I don't know. Oh, here's another one that they tell. This is in the topic of the precious human life, which we've touched on a little bit. I haven't given you the whole teaching or the outlines, but just thinking about how precious our life is and how rare it is to get this kind of opportunity, because it's difficult to create the karma for it. You know, you look around in the world and how many people are keeping good ethical conduct. Yeah, I mean, what do we read about in the newspaper? All the headlines, people not keeping good ethical conduct, you know, mostly. And you look at the presidential election and, you know, are people, you know, all these debates that were going on, were people keeping good ethical conduct? Yeah, the way they talk to other people and all, it's like, yuck. So, yeah, so that, you know, there's this whole teaching about, you know, it's difficult to have the opportunity we have, because it's difficult to create the causes, because it's difficult, you know, not many people keep really pure ethical conduct. And so they said that, let's see, I want to get the details of the story right, that having a precious human life is as rare as a man who is blind accidentally stepping off a cliff and falling on top of a donkey who happened to be passing, riding, you know, galloping, I don't know, underneath, and falling on him backwards, and then the donkey taking off. So riding backwards on a donkey, and the guy has, I think he's blind or he has no hands or something like this. And that, the rarity of that happening is the rarity of our getting a precious human life. Yeah, but again, the stories we're told is like, this is true. You know, it's not a funny story. This is, yeah. So it was quite interesting. Yeah. So, you know, when Buddhism goes from one culture to another, there are certain cultural elements that have to change. But you have to be extremely careful that the teachings don't change in this process. And this is something that very much concerns me with Buddhism coming to the West, because there's some people who now are talking about secular Buddhism, where you know, you don't really believe in rebirth, and you know, this kind of thing. You're agnostic regarding rebirth because the Buddha didn't really teach it. And you're agnostic regarding all these different realms of existence, and, you know, like that. It's very clear in the sutras the Buddha taught about rebirth, and he taught about different realms. But then, you know, some people are saying, no, we just need to strip all of that away from Buddhism. That's just all cultural stuff, yeah? And I really disagree, because if you don't, at least, I'm not saying everybody has to believe in rebirth, but unless you have space in your mind to consider that possibility, you know, without outright rejecting it, then the rest of the path doesn't make much sense. Because if there's no rebirth, yeah, then when people are suffering, yeah, then what's the easiest way to ease their suffering? Kill them. Is that good? No. No, that's horrible. Yeah? So, you know, whereas if you know, have some space in your mind to consider rebirth, yeah, then, like one of the inmates that I write to, he's really good. I hope he was one. I'm getting off track, but it's a good story. He committed a murder when he was 16 years old in the middle of a drug deal, and he was arrested, tried, got life without parole. you know, at 16 years old. Yeah. And so he's 30, he's been over half of his life in prison. Yeah. And there was recently a Supreme Court case that said from now on we can't give life without parole for juveniles. But then it didn't say it was to be applied retroactively, so then there was another Supreme Court case that said, yes, we should apply it retroactively. So now he's hoping someday to get out, to be eligible for parole. And this guy, he doesn't need to be in prison. He's not gonna do anything. Now, I know him quite well over a number of years, and I've visited him in prison. Anyway, he told me, you know, before he met Buddhism, because his mind was totally messed up, you know, I mean, between sexual abuse and drug dealing and all sorts of stuff going on since the time he was like 5 years old. He was really messed up when he went to prison, and he told me that sometimes he thought of suiciding. And then when he learned Buddhism and he learned about rebirth, he realized suicide doesn't do anything. It doesn't stop your suffering. And so he realized at that point that then he had to really work on his mind and change, you know? And he's really changed, really, really changed. So I hope he gets out sometime. Actually, he's now a she. Yeah, she's transiting, which is a whole other court case in prison because, you know, they don't want to pay for it. Anyway, yeah, so I think a belief in rebirth, it influences how you look at life, because you see that there's no easy way, external easy way out of our difficulties, that the only way is to change what's going on in our heart. And you begin to realize that you have incredible untapped potential that is just extraordinary, that your family never told you about, your society never told you about, you know, that you have this amazing potential. And so, you know, to really use it in your life, and there's time, you know, this path is going to take a long time, but you have a path, you have the potential, and so you just go ahead forward, going in a good direction. And if you have that kind of attitude, then whatever comes your way in life doesn't knock you down. Because whatever comes your way is, this is another opportunity for me to grow. Yeah, this is another opportunity for me to uncover my potential, for me to learn how to counteract my ignorance, anger, and attachment. So even bad things happen in life, you transform them and you learn from them and you benefit from them. So your mind always remains optimistic, even when things don't go the way you want. Yeah, which I think is a beautiful way to live life. Yeah, because we're always going to have problems in life, aren't we? I mean, we're in cyclic existence. Problems are always going to come. The thing is, how do we deal with the problems? How do we respond to them? And I think many of you are familiar with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. You may have seen him on TV, or, you know, watched some of his videos online or whatever, read his books. You know, when you think of somebody who had to become leader of the government at age 15, and at age 24 he was a refugee, and, you know, went from the highest place, the highest climate, into the lowest in India, and there's all sorts of disease there, and many Tibetans died, and Tibetans were killed in his homeland. There's environmental devastation in Tibet, and he's had to live with all this. And then, of course, you know, the Chinese communists coming in, taking things over, making a mess, calling him the splitter of the homeland. I mean, talk about getting criticized. The communist government just lays into the Dalai Lama like you can't believe. And yet, you know, you go to a teaching, you meet His Holiness. He's a happy person. And he has a great sense of humor, and he's very warm. And so you have to go, okay, what's he doing? Yeah, because most people who had his life experiences would just be so, you know, bitter and down in the dumps. And His Holiness is happy. So this guy is doing something that we want to find out about. Yeah? And I saw that in, you know, my other teachers as well. Yeah, Lama Yeshe also, I think he was born in the same year as His Holiness, so he was also 24, you know, when he had to, you know, he was at Sera Monastery, which was one of the big monasteries outside of Lhasa. And there was all this turbulence in Lhasa because the Chinese government had invited the Dalai Lama to an opera, but he was supposed to come alone with no bodyguards. So of course, you know, I mean, it was like they were going to kidnap him or do something, kill him or something. So he fled. That's when he fled and went over the Himalayas. So there was all this, you know, ruckus going on in Lhasa. So Lama was 24, he was doing his studies at Sera Monastery, and so a lot of the monks there, they went into the mountains just behind the monastery to wait until things calmed down in Lhasa so they could go back to their monastery and continue their studies. Well, when they heard that His Holiness had fled, then they knew that, you know, they can't stay there. Yeah, and they had only gone to the mountains with their tea bowl, which doubles as a food bowl. No Tibetan monk travels without their tea bowl, you know, and some sampa, because that's what you eat all the time. That's this ground barley flour. So they had gone into the mountains with just a little bit of that, and they couldn't go back to the monastery. So they had to just flee, going over the Himalaya mountains in March, you know, so where you still, I mean, it's just glaciers and snow and everything. And like I said, going from the highest climate where there's very few viruses down to the lowest climate in India. They arrived in India. India was so poor in those days. Nehru was incredibly compassionate, but India didn't have many resources. So Lama and all these other monks, they were put in this old British POW camp. That was where they lived. If you saw 7 Years in Tibet, any of you see that movie? Yeah. So you know, Heinrich Herr, the German explorer, that's where they threw him because they thought he was a spy. You know, so it was an old British POW camp. They threw all the Tibetan monks in there. Many of them died. You know, Lama was a fortunate one. He didn't die at that time. He had a defective heart, so he died young, but, you know, after some years. And, you know, they lived in, I mean, they were so poor, it was amazing. And then you meet Lama, you know, after, you know, he met one woman and she had some money and he, and bought some land and they started Kopan Monastery. And then they started teaching Westerners, and still everybody was really poor. I mean, the days that I went there, we were so poor. I mean, for dinner, the Westerners, we had the luxury dinner because we had a piece of bread with peanut butter. The monks just had a piece of bread. Yeah, we had the luxury because we were Westerners. So, I mean, it was really poor. And, you know, all this hardship that they went through. And I remember Lama, this is so clear in my memory, sitting there one day telling us, you know, because people asked him, you know, tell us about how you got out of Tibet. And he would, you know, so he told the story. And then he said, you know, I'm really glad I became a refugee because if I hadn't become a refugee, I wouldn't have really understood what the Dharma meant. I probably would have become a very arrogant geshe and gone back to my own village and been the abbot of the temple in my own village. But I never would have deeply understood the teachings, and I would probably be kind of puffed up. But he said, and then he did this, he put his hands together like this, and he said, I have to thank Mao Zedong for making me a refugee. You imagine that? I mean, he said, I have to thank Mao Zedong for making me a refugee. My goodness, you know? So it's like there you see the power of the Dharma to be able to change your mind even in the middle of horrific situations. Yeah? And Lama had this great sense of humor. He was, you know, a very happy person in spite of what he had been through. So, you know, you see people like this, and then you go, what are they doing? Yeah, something is up here. And it is quite beautiful. And so, you know, to meet those kind of people and to have the opportunity to learn from them and to have the opportunity to practice, it's very rare. Yeah, very rare. I mean, I was the office manager at Copan for some time, and you know, all these people would come up and, you know, be interested in the course, and then they would sign up. They would go to 1 or 2 days of the course, and then because one of my teachers, he would clear his throat a lot, then they said, oh, I can't understand him, you know. And besides, there's fleas in the in the meditation hall because we didn't have a proper building, so there was, we built a, you know, we had this very big tent and then these straw mats, and that was our meditation hall. And there were fleas all over the straw mats. And so some people would come, you know, and it's like, I'm a Westerner, I can't tolerate this, you know, bye-bye. Yeah? And so, you know, you would see people get so close to the Dharma, and then, boing, you know, they didn't have the karma to actually learn it and immerse themselves, and they would, you know, go away. So you know, you really begin to see this when you hang around sometime, and you see how what an amazing opportunity we have. Mm-hmm. Okay, I went off on a tangent after another, a tangent of a tangent.
It was a fun.
Yeah, yeah, I thought maybe it would be helpful. Any other questions, or should we do our meditation and then start? Okay, so I wanted to go over, because there's so much to tell you, but there's no time, to go over a little bit, you know, what the Buddha described as actions to practice and actions to abandon on the path, and especially starting with basic ethical principles, you know, to follow, because when we follow these, first of all, we have a better life this lifetime, fewer problems in relationships and with society. And second of all, we create good karma for future lifetimes, and we imbue our mind also with the merit that enables us to gain realizations when we study and practice the further teachings. Okay, and so when I talk about this, it's not Sunday school with, you know, don't do this, this is naughty, and do this instead, because otherwise you're going to get punished. No, we're not talking about that. I said yesterday, there's no punishment, there's no reward. The Buddha didn't make this system up. Okay? Buddha just described it. And I call keeping good ethical conduct. Because it's kind of the basic thing we have to start with before we can really do a whole lot more, is I call ethical conduct, don't be a jerk. Yeah? Because when you think of the people that you call a jerk, they're the people who are doing some of these unethical things. And yeah, you become a jerk. Yeah? Yeah. So, okay, so the Buddha described 10 things to avoid. Okay, 3 we do physically, 4 verbally or in terms of our communication, and 3 mentally. Okay, so to start with the grossest ones, they're the ones we do physically, so they're actually the easiest to control. The mental ones are the hardest to control because they're just your thought. But in order to do something physically, we have to have the motivation, the intention mentally, and it has to grow and get big enough to make our body move or make our mouth move. Okay, so it's easier to refrain from the physical and verbal ones than the mental ones. So the first one is taking life. Yeah? Why don't abandon doing that? Because everybody cherishes their life first and foremost of anything, isn't it? You know, before anything else, everybody just wants to stay alive. So, you know, don't take the life of other living beings. So, you know, needless to say human beings, but also animals and insects. And so that's why, you know, you come here and you see us all scoop up the various bugs and take them outside. And yeah, some of you out when we were, when I came down where you were loading wood yesterday, Venerable Semke had found one log with this, he was about this big, I forget what she called him. What? Yeah, that was it. A wood-boring beetle or something, whatever it was. But yeah, wood-boring. And you know, and she showed him to me and like that, and it's like, he wasn't very pretty. You know, I don't know how I'd feel with him crawling up my arm. But
he did that like similar, the same kind of bug did crawl up my arm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, but instead of going, you know, then you take him and put him somewhere else where he's safe, okay? So we do that kind of thing. Then the second thing is to not take what hasn't been freely given to us. So that means stealing. When we say stealing, we usually think of burglars and crooks, but when we say not taking what hasn't been freely given to us, then it makes us look a little bit more at our own actions. You know, when have we borrowed things from friends and not returned them? Yeah. So we're taking things that weren't freely given to us to keep. They were only loaned. And we need to repay the money or return the thing. You know, sometimes we try and sneak into theaters or different things without buying a ticket. Yeah, or on taxes, not paying taxes that we should pay. Or you're working at a company and you use the telephone and the paper and the different things of the company for your own personal use, whereas the company, you know, some companies may give you permission to do that, but many don't. But you use that for your own personal use, yeah? Or you go out to dinner and you declare it as a company expense when it wasn't, yeah? So, yeah, so when you really look at it, it's not taking what hasn't been freely given is not so easy to avoid. Yeah, many people do all sorts of of things around this, okay? So that's the second one. Then the third one that we do physically is unwise and unkind sexual behavior, okay? So what this refers to principally is if you're in a relationship, regardless of whether you're married or not, you go outside your relationship, or even if you're single, you go with somebody who's already in a relationship. Because that just, I mean, it makes havoc, it creates havoc and destroys families, and children find out what was going on, and it's a mess. And then other things, I think in our day and age that would constitute unwise and unkind sexual behavior would be having unprotected sex when there's the danger of STDs. You know, I think it's completely, totally inconsiderate if you're, you know, if you have something, to not use protected sex if you sleep with somebody else. Yeah, or even if you don't have anything, you know, take care and protect yourself. And then also, I think, kind of using people just for our own sexual satisfaction. Yeah, and you know, because I know this hooking up culture is quite big on campus now, and off campus, but you know, and everybody said, well, everybody's consenting, so there's no problem. Great, if everybody's consenting, fine. But you have to be careful, because somebody, one party could say, oh yeah, we're consenting, there's no emotional thing going on, we're just enjoying each other, that's it. But meanwhile, one of the people is getting attached, you know? And so one of the persons saying, oh yeah, we're just enjoying, it's just sex, nothing. Meanwhile, the other person's getting attached. Then what happens when you decide to stop sleeping together? Somebody's really hurt, yeah? So I think just having that attitude of my sexual satisfaction at somebody else's expense, not caring if they're getting attached and emotionally, you know, if they're getting emotionally involved or not, I think that's highly inconsiderate, yeah? And so something, again, to avoid, because it creates so many problems and hurt feelings and guilt and, you know, all this kind of stuff. Okay, so those are the three physical ones, yeah? Then there's 4 verbal ones. The first one is lying. And so the worst kind of lies to do are about your spiritual attainments, saying that you've realized this or that or the other thing, okay? So I always tell people, if you hear somebody tell you that, you know, they've attained enlightenment, or they're, you know, they've realized emptiness, or they're a bodhisattva. Because in Buddhism, you're not allowed to talk about your realizations publicly, even if you have them, let alone if you don't have them and you're totally lying about them. So if somebody starts boasting to you of their great spiritual realizations, I always say, hold on to your wallet. Yeah? Because the next thing they're going to do is, I'm so great, and wouldn't you like to make a donation? You know, don't you want to be the disciple of a realized somebody? So, I mean, there's these people even on the internet. It's really rather weird. Anyway, okay, and then all the other lies that we tell. Yeah, which is a whole, I mean, if we did a discussion on that, it becomes quite interesting. You know, all of our little white lies, the ways we exaggerate, the way we tell a story just kind of slightly different to enter, you know, to emphasize a certain point, or how we tell just a little white lie so that somebody doesn't get hurt. You know, what are we telling little white lies about that are actually big lies? You know, when we've done something that we don't want other people to know about, that has probably been another one of the unethical things. Yeah, I talked to Bill Clinton. Yeah? Yeah, you guys were mostly young when the whole thing with Bill Clinton went on. But,
I said if alive at all.
Yeah. And then, yeah, you probably weren't even alive, huh? Oh, you missed so much gossip. Yeah, I don't know how many millions of dollars the country used, you know, because this was one scandal that everybody could understand. You know, most of the scandals in government, you know, involving money, they're very complicated, you know, and scandals on Wall Street, they're complicated, difficult. You know, him in the Oval Office with Monica Lewinsky, everybody understood what was going on. Yeah, and it was a mess. Yeah, and you see many people's careers are, yeah, there's been even something this year, what was it? But anyway, many people's careers are ruined because of lying, you know? Okay, then, so to really check up, why do we lie? Yeah, really good thing. Then the next one is creating disharmony with our words, or creating disharmony amongst people. So, you know, so-and-so doesn't like so-and, or so-and-so, they're not on especially good terms, you know, but you hear this one say something nasty about this one, so you go to this one and you say, so-and-so said this about you. And then, of course, that person's upset and says something nasty. And then you go back, so-and-so said this about you. And as a result, you make these people quarrel. Okay? Lots of times it's done out of jealousy. We don't want people to be friends with each other or close to each other, so we ruin the, you know, the relationship. We do it if we want a promotion and, you know, we don't want somebody else to get it, so we badmouth them behind their back to create disharmony. Or, like I was saying yesterday, in an office situation, dividing into factions and speaking badly about other people. Okay, then the third verbal one to avoid is what they could say, harsh speech. So that's insulting people, verbally abusing them, you know, ridiculing them, making fun of them, saying things that in general hurt people's feelings. Okay, which we're also very good at, aren't we? Yeah, especially we're mad, maybe they did something we didn't like, and we want to retaliate, so we say something really nasty right to their face, you know, and then we make up some excuse like this is really for their own good. Yeah. And then the fourth verbal one is idle talk, which is just blah, 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 talking about things that are inconsequential, you know, and not really of any value. So this doesn't mean that every time you talk to somebody you have to have a really intense, meaningful discussion. Because, you know, when you're at work, you just have to be friendly with people and, you know, you chit-chat and everything. But you're quite aware that you're just chit-chatting in order to keep a friendly atmosphere. You're not chit-chatting to make yourself look good. You're not doing it more than you have to. You're not doing it to, you know, to waste time and just for amusement. Okay?
So again, it's about the motive.
Yes. Yeah, very much about the motive. Okay, so those are the four verbal ones. Then the three mental ones. The first one is coveting other people's stuff. So, you know, you look at somebody's stuff, they have like, these shoes are like so cool, or their backpacks, or, you know, something they have, maybe jewelry or, you know, whatever. And it's like, wow, wonder where they got that. I wonder if I could drop some hints and get them to give it to me. Yeah? You know how we do that? But this one is just in our mind. We don't even have to drop the hints verbally. Yeah? We're coveting stuff that belongs to other people. And this is what advertising tries to get us to do. Yeah, see that car on the what, showroom floor? Don't you want it? Okay, so covet, 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 covet. Yeah. So, and then the second one is ill will or malice. So that's, again, just a mental one. Sitting and plotting how you're going to get your revenge, how you're going to hurt somebody's feelings. You know, you're just so mad at them. And, you know, you're plotting just the perfect thing to say to really, ooh, you know, because you know where they're sensitive, to really say it. Or, you know, how you're, yeah, just how you're going to, yeah, make somebody else suffer. And then the third mental one, again, we don't have to say or do anything, is wrong views. And so this would be wrong views, again, like important things, like saying it's totally impossible to become enlightened because human beings are inherently selfish. Yeah? Or, you know, something like that, kind of, you know, there's no such thing as karma and its effects. I can do whatever behavior I want to, and as long as nobody catches me, it's okay. Yeah, so these kind of wrong views. So those are the 10 that they say to abandon. Yeah. Then the 10 to practice, there's 2 sets of 10 to practice. The first set of what to practice, which creates merit or virtuous karma, is just the simple abandoning of those. Yeah, saying, I'm not going to do them. You might be in this situation, you're tempted to do it, and you say, nope, I'm not going to self-sabotage, I'm not going to hurt somebody else, I'm not going to do this. Okay, and you refrain from doing it. So that itself is a virtuous action. Also, we have this thing in Buddhism of taking precepts. So for example, we monastics, we have a certain set of precepts, but also the lay followers, they have a set of 5 precepts. And you can take 1, 2, 3, 4, or all 5 when you take refuge in precepts. And when you keep a precept, what it means is every time you're not doing that action, even if you're sleeping, you're accumulating merit. Okay? So let's say, like the 5 lay precepts to abandon killing, stealing, unwise and unkind sexual behavior, lying, and intoxicants. Okay? So let's say somebody takes 1 or 2 or, you know, however many of the precepts. They're sitting in this room not killing anybody. Okay? Another person sitting in the room, they don't have the precept. Okay? Both of them are not killing at that moment, but the person who has the precept not to kill is accumulating good karma because they have that intention not to kill that's embodied in the precept, and they are living according to that intention and that promise that they made. So they're accumulating good karma just sitting here in the room, whereas the other person who also isn't killing is not accumulating that good karma. Okay, so keeping precepts is another way to create a lot of virtue. Okay. Then the second way of creating virtue is to do the opposite of each of the negative actions. So instead of killing, you preserve life. You know, there's animals in danger. You take them, you know, you just take the bug out of the house and put it back in the grass or whatever. Yeah. You respect other people's possessions. You look over them, make sure that they're safe, that they're not misused. Okay? So you, instead of using your speech to insult people and hurt their feelings, you use your speech to praise them and bring them happiness, or you use your speech to create harmony, to bring people together so that they get along. So actually doing the opposite of the 10 is also something to practice, something virtuous. Now your questions.
So the reason why the person who's taking the precepts is getting good merit and stuff, is that because the other person who hasn't, like, and the other person isn't getting that? Is that because they haven't, like, made that decision and promised not to kill?
Right, right.
So even though they're not killing, that doesn't mean that they haven't, like, made that decision.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so again, it's the power of the mind saying, I'm not going to kill. And, you know, there's a short ceremony where you take the precepts, and so you imagine the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in front, and you say in their presence, I'm not going to kill. And you have that firm intention, yeah? So that then, as you're going through your life, as long as you're not killing, you're, you know, keeping that intention and creating virtue. Sometimes they say it generates worse karma because,
breaking a commitment.
Right.
Rather than just, you know, living the way you live, you're breaking something that you committed to.
Right. So, you know, that you have to overcome the promise you made so you have more energy in doing it, okay? But other times they say that if you have precepts, in the end, it may not be as bad as for lay people, as for people who don't have precepts. Because if you have precepts, you're more likely to realize at some point that you made a mistake and do purification. Whereas the person who doesn't have precepts, yeah, may never even consider anything afterwards.
I had a question about lying.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you lie to spare somebody's feelings, you have good intentions, but you're still lying.
Yeah.
Right? So it gets kind of muddy. Like, I mean, it's best. I mean, you shouldn't lie, right? Altogether.
Yeah.
You shouldn't lie. You should avoid. You should say things that you can say truthfully that won't hurt the person.
Okay.
Or honesty, but honesty will hurt somebody else's feelings, and then that's like.
Okay. So there's many situations in which we lie. One is that we did something that was not very nice, and we want to cover it up because we don't want other people to know what a jerk we did. We were, okay? That kind of lying, then that's kind of double trouble because you have the original negative action plus you're lying on top of it. That one, we got to come clean, accept the results of our actions, and purify, okay? Another situation, like if a hunter came up here to the Abbey and said, yeah, I want to, you know, where are the deer on your land? You know, are we going to say, oh, you go right over there, they usually bed down there? No, I mean, because that's going to, you know, that puts them in danger. He's going to create a negative action. For you, from your side, there's no personal interest. We're not getting any tips for doing that. So you know, you can lie, but I often think it's better there to just, you change the topic.
Just don't answer that.
You don't answer the question. Lots of times, you see this lots of times, when people are asked questions, they avoid the question and they talk something. Yeah. We're very good at that. So in this kind of situation, you know, rather than lie, you kind of, change the topic or do something. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if somebody asks you directly, you know, did you do this? And you know that by saying so, you know, they would have hurt feelings. I mean, again, you have to think about what you did.
Right.
Yeah, but also it doesn't mean that you have to, you can use tact in responding to things, okay? So the example I always give is your aunt invites you over for dinner, you know, and you love your aunt, she loves you, and she made exactly the kind of food you don't like. Yeah? And so you're sitting there thinking, okay, I better eat it, not to hurt her feelings, even though I don't like it so much. And in the middle of it, she says, how do you like the food? So are you going to go, Auntie, it stinks? It's awful? You know, I don't want to finish it? No, you're not going to say that. But what is it she really wants to know when she asks, do you like the food?
If you appreciate what she's done.
Yeah.
So like if somebody gives you a gift, you're not so keen on the gift, but you know that they gave it to you out of the kindness in their heart.
Yeah.
You say, I really appreciate the gift, you know, but you don't have to say, oh yeah, I like this, you know, like.
Right.
You can just.
You don't have to say I like it. You don't have to say it's awful.
Omitting is not lying. Like,
Yeah.
Not saying something.
Because the real question, like your aunt is asking, the real question, what she wants to know, she doesn't really care about if you like the food or not. What she wants to know is, I care about you, and I made this food to show you that I care about you. Do you understand how much I love you? That's what she really is asking. So you answer that question and you say, it's so kind of you to make this food for me, and I really love coming and spending time with you. Yeah.
You don't say, oh, this food's not great.
No, because really that wasn't what she wanted to know.
Right.
Yeah? So you're not lying in that case. You're actually answering the question that she wanted to know, you know. I know sometimes people have difficulties. They learn about Buddhism and then they go home to their families, and their families are going, are you becoming a Buddhist? You know, what are those people, did they brainwash you? What's gonna, you know? So you don't go, yeah, Mom and Dad, I'm a Buddhist now, isn't this fantastic? You know, this is my ultimate rebellion. I'm going to tell you I'm a Buddhist so that you'll be really unhappy. No.
Thinking of getting ordained.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I brought my hair clippers home. Will you cut my hair for me?
That's the family thing we could do together.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not going to have any grandkids. Too bad. Ask your other children. You know, you don't say that, okay? So, you know, you say, oh, I went to this course, I really learned a lot of things that were very interesting. And many of these things were things that you taught me when I was a kid, like good ethical conduct, like forgiving and being kind to people. And they were teaching the same things. It just built on what you taught me when I was a little kid, and I appreciate you so much for being a good parent and teaching me this. That's how you answer the question. Okay? You see?
Yes.
Yeah? And then you not only answer the question like this, you go and take out the garbage without them asking you to take out the garbage. That will bowl your parents over. You know? You take out the garbage, empty the dishwasher, clean up your room. Yeah? And your parents will go, wow. You know, all these years I've been trying to get my son, daughter to clean their room or help a little bit around the task. They went to one Buddhist course and they come back and they're so helpful. Buddhism is great. Yeah, I like Buddhism. My kid's so much nicer. Yeah. Yeah. And I've had family members tell me that, you know, when their spouse or their parent comes to a Buddhist course, when they come home, they're so much nicer. So even though they're not Buddhist, they like it when their family members go to retreat. But so you have to be nicer. You have to show what you're doing, you know, and then they notice. Yeah. I mean, they might almost faint. So, but that's the way to do it. And small things like this, you know, which are, in one way they're small, but when you think about it, if your mom or dad's been trying to get you to help around the house for, you know, 25 years, and now you do it without them asking, that's a big thing for them. Yeah, that'll make a good impression. Yeah, and it's no sweat off your back, is it? And it just creates better relationships in the family. Yeah, same thing at work. There's a mess at the coffee machine, instead of going, well, everybody leaves the coffee machine such a mess. You know, you can bring it up and, you know, ask people at a meeting and ask people to clean up. But if they don't, you know, for 30 seconds, you take out the cloth and you wipe away the spilled stuff.
And even still, nobody sees the good that you've done.
You have the pleasure of knowing that you did something kind. Yeah? And, you know, so many of our human arguments are about small issues like this. Yeah, so if you take care of the thing, it really prevents many arguments.
Something that one of an expectation that I went with said a story regarding this, and he said that when he was little, he had an aunt that would always ask him to clean the floor and like do things, and he would like run off and like hide in the bushes, and like, I don't want to do this, you know, and like run away from his aunt. And then he realized after doing that for a while, as a little kid, while he was in the bushes, like all anxious and like looking if his aunt was coming or not, and like, you know, spending a lot of time there until his aunt forgot about it. He's like, this is taking me a lot more energy than if I actually went and cleaned the floor. Like, this is like way more frustrating to think about this. Like he was a little kid.
Yeah.
That's when I realized that it's just better to do these things instead of just like ruminating or like thinking or trying to avoid them or like talk about them.
Yeah, this is so much easier to do. Yeah.
My parents always told me, the time you spent arguing with me, you could have been done with it by now.
Exactly. Yeah. But why do we argue? Because it involves my autonomy and nobody's going to tell me what to do. Yeah. I am an adult. I'm 16 and I'm almost all-knowing. Yeah, 16 is the age where you are almost Buddha. Isn't it? Because when you're 16, you really know everything. Yeah. Somehow, as you get older, you know less and less. Yeah. And somehow, as you grow older, your parents seem to know more and more. Yeah. It's quite interesting. But you know, if you don't make that kind of thing in your mind into an issue of this is about my autonomy, then it won't be about your autonomy. Yeah. Because I used to, my thing with my parents when I was a teenager is like, they wanted me home at a certain time and not 1 minute later, and you know, and for me, I was arguing about my autonomy. You know, I'm 16, 17, I can take care of myself perfectly well. Yeah, why are you telling me I have to be home at such and such a time? That was my concern. What was my parents' concern?
Your safety.
My safety.
But you don't think like that.
No, you don't think like that. So they're arguing about one thing, you're arguing about another thing. You're totally missing each other. You know? So if it's like, oh, they just care about my safety. Okay, how can I do things, you know, if I'm going to be out later, you know, to let them know I'm safe? And this doesn't mean I'm not an autonomous individual. I'm just being considerate.
Because they were kind enough to keep me alive this long.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my case, because I knew if I had a midnight curfew, 1 minute past midnight, my mother would she would be on the phone if I was a minute late, calling the police, frantic, my daughter's been kidnapped, she's been in a car accident, you know?
So call them 30 minutes early and be like, hey, yeah, maybe.
Exactly.
Maybe 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
Just thoughtful.
Yeah. Just thoughtful things. So much easier.